Former UK Defence Secretary Tobias Ellwood recently joined with Chief of General Staff General Sir Patrick Sanders in suggesting the British public could face a call-up to the army in the event of a war with Russia. Video linked in the description. Not only were Ellwood's comments on Sky News both hawkish and bloodthirsty in their tenor, but indeed it would seem he is keen and eager to see young men, and presumably women also in our enlightened progressive utopia, sent off to die in a freezing ditch in the far reaches of Eastern Europe, to say nothing of his manifest desire to see defence spending doubled. This video will largely echo the brilliant and hilarious commentary on this topic of cancelled British comedian Alistair Williams, linked in the description. And I have little to add, other than to emphatically reiterate Al's forthright and entirely appropriate response to Mr. Ellwood and General Sir Patrick Sanders and any other ageing warmonger who thirsts for satanic blood sacrifices of the sort they are now once more proposing. Sod off. War with Russia. A ground war in Ukraine with Russia. This is what is effectively being proposed by the upper echelons of the British establishment. And to anyone who might wave off Britain as irrelevant in 2024, allow me to remind you once more that the concept of the nation is itself now irrelevant. The nation has been successfully neutered beyond its nominal application as an instrument of sentimentalised propaganda to manipulate its dozy-eyed constituents in the direction that the supranational interests of the central banks and arms manufacturers desire. Let us be under no illusion that what is being advocated for by Tobias Ellwood and General Sir Patrick Sanders is the game plan not only for Britain, but also for the entire West, the US, the EU, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. Indeed, one need only observe the posturing of the Biden regime these past 2 years and the tacit endorsement of their allies by way of the hundreds of billions in taxpayer dollars we have now sent to prop up this absurd military-industrial boondoggle in the frozen steppes of Eastern Europe, to understand that every military-aged person in these countries is now potentially at risk of being sent to fight and die to prolong the lunatic conflict-backed debt bubble that our reckless ruling class has created over the past century or longer for no other reason than to line their own pockets. And while I am a British citizen, though technically outside of the standard draft age, with my position now made clear, you may assume that everything that follows applies not only to the unfortunate young men and women of the British public, but of the entire Western world. And as such, as the father of a 17-year-old boy, I have a serious dog in this fight. Who the hell do these clowns think they're fooling anymore? Do they think they can throw up some posters of Lord Kitchener and his decidedly dodgy moustache, pointing imposingly at the viewer and crying, "Your country needs you"? Do they think they can roll out some tired old creep like Winston Churchill to tediously sermonise a gullible and patriotic public into martial fervour? Indeed, these tactics, albeit in a more 21st century format, are exactly what they've been attempting for the past 24 months, ever since they goaded Putin into this conflict in the first place. And have they worked? If anything, the constant barrage of pro-Ukraine propaganda has turned folk in the other direction. I don't know about you, but I'm seeing far fewer blue and yellow flags hanging from the balconies of the houses I pass from day to day. Far fewer adorning the Twitter profiles of the liberal left. Far fewer people earnestly tut-tutting about that evil monster Putin. What is the matter with these cretins? One could forgive the likes of David Icke for calling them lizard people, so backward and reptilian is their brain function. I'll say it again. Sod off, Tobias. None of us, or very few at least, are marching off to die in some stinking muddy trench in southern Russia for you and your mates at Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. How many billions of dollars have our ennobled elites now collectively thrown into the meat grinder of Kiev to prolong this unwinnable conflict? 200? 300? Is it up to 500 billion yet? If not, then it won't be long. But the buzz is wearing off. The Russians refuse to budge, no matter how many Stinger missiles and F-16s they hand over to Zelensky, because, as I said at the very outset, this war is completely unwinnable, and now they need to up the ante. They need to re-engage the public with the fight. They need some fresh blood in the water. And what better way to do that than to send you or your sons or your grandsons off to get killed and maimed in that ancient graveyard of global conflict, the vast and unconquerable tundra of the Central Eurasian landmass. And yet, I believe, it is not only a practical necessity of this, their latest failed war. I believe they crave our blood sacrifice. I believe they yearn and thirst for it. I believe these people are possessed by demons, and in many cases, in service to the devil himself. Tobias Ellwood and Patrick Sanders and all their ilk are evil, psychopathic fiends who would probably gain some kind of perverse sexual pleasure from watching legions of young Westerners fall before Russian machine guns and artillery, and would likely implode with orgastic rapture from the safety of their taxpayer-funded fallout shelters if the clock ever did strike midnight and the nukes were finally launched. How many more times do I need to say it? This war with Russia cannot be won. I will not fight and die at the pleasure of the neoliberal plutocrats of the New World Order simply to preserve their flailing Ponzi scheme. And more to the point, nor will I allow my son to. I will stand before any jackbooted thug who comes to carry him off to war and happily lay down my life in defence of this principle. No more war. No more war. I once wrote an essay, linked in the description, in defence of what my grandfathers did in the Pacific and Europe in the 1940s, as I had for my entire life clung to the notion that World War II was indeed the good war, and that had we not stopped Hitler and the Japanese Empire, then the world today would have been enslaved. Having been challenged on my thesis by a number of readers, I have since spent some time reflecting on my position, and while I still consider my grandfathers heroic in the most fundamental sense, that they had the stones to march off to war at the age of 20 and face horrific danger and unimaginable hardship for a cause they believed to be right at the time, with the limited information available to them, I have now recalibrated my view on the Second World War. For the fact of the matter is that had Hitler not initially been funded by Wall Street, the same people who subsequently got rich off war with him, we would never have had to stop him. It would not have been an issue. Likewise, my subsequent research on Japan's war strategy unearthed a fact little known by complacent Antipodeans such as my grandparents, their offspring, and indeed my own generation, that Japan never intended on invading and occupying Australia and New Zealand. What did my grandfathers fight for? What did so many of their friends die for? For the same supranational banking and industrial cartel that now, through its mouthpieces like Tobias Ellwood, is attempting to shunt us into another world war for the sole purpose of maintaining its hegemony for another few decades. I'm having none of it. Sod off, Tobias. But thankfully, I think I'm in the majority. I'll say it again. Who do these clowns think they're fooling? Quite apart from having the balls on his Sky News interview to claim that Ukraine is a democracy, what, you mean the puppet dictatorship installed by the Obama regime in 2014, which has since banned non-government media outlets and all opposition political parties? And also insinuating that we in the West need to fight authoritarian regimes. What, like the authoritarian regimes we live under in the West? The regimes that stripped away all our civil rights for 2 years and effectively mandated experimental medication in the name of a virus with a 99.98% survival rate? Apart from all this, Tobias Ellwood also said, there is a 1939 feel to the world right now. You'd really like us to believe that, wouldn't you, Tobes? Problem is, mate, we have the internet now. We're not as gullible and naive as our grandfathers were. May they rest in peace. And we will not fight and die to further underwrite your bloodthirsty, faltering world order. Jog on, chap. Get fucked. Or send your own kids off to die in Russia. Furthermore, we will no longer fund this. Well, I guess actually we will, until enough people wake up and the revolution begins in earnest. But waking up people are. 1939. It would be hilarious if this creep wasn't so deadly earnest. And though I believe I'm increasingly in the majority with my anti-war stance, we're still a long way from the fringe of the woods. And all it could take is one decent false flag operation for them to whip the great unwashed into a frenzy, and once more garner that ancient human will to warfare. For this is surely what they now need, now that they've used up all the fighting-aged men of Ukraine. And thus I implore you, do not give these warmongers any oxygen. If you hear anyone humming and hawing about the merits of a land war with Russia, shut it down immediately. I do not even ask that you show them this video. Play them Alistair Williams' video instead. He articulates the scorn that he and I share for these war pigs with an acerbic humour far superior to anything I can muster. Do not give any ground to those who would consider conscription a viable option, nor even the committal of standing volunteer forces to this futile and unwinnable conflict. Furthermore, we must demand a cessation of aid to dictator Zelensky and his puppet proxy regime of the liberal world order war machine. Even if it never comes to boots on the ground, which I'm fairly confident it won't, so absurd are Ellwood's Churchillian pontifications. How many more hundreds of billions of dollars are we to commit to this farce? Billions of dollars created out of thin air, conjured into existence on a computer screen and underwritten by the future tax receipts of our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and probably by forthcoming estate taxes on our own inheritances also. There is a word for this type of non-consensual financial servitude that many of the less astute among us may fail to recognise, and I'm certain most of you know what I'm going to say, but let me spell it out nonetheless. Slavery. We will not be slaves. We will not fight, be maimed, and die for you and your bankster buddies, Tobias. Anyone who's taken the time to observe the machinations of the elites of DC, Wall Street, the City of London, Brussels and Davos these past 80-odd years should be under no illusion as to what is going on here, and we won't be fooled again. The time has come to say no. The time has come for revolution. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos. Please also subscribe to my Substack at jjdawson.substack.com. And if you'd like to keep in touch, please do follow me on X at RealJJDawson. You can also follow me on Getter, Gab and Minds. And of course, if you enjoyed this, please do give it a like and share it about, because it really helps me out.